Hello and welcome to Must Read Fiction, a place for people who know that life is better with a novel in hand. I'm Erin Popelka, and I'm delighted to be here today with author Kathie Giorgio. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it is such a pleasure to have you here. Kathie Giorgio is the author of 12 books, 6 of which are novels, and the most recent is All Told. And I know you have a copy of All Told with you there today. Let's see that beautiful
There
book.
it is.
Excellent. So there is All Told, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So Kathie Giorgio, please tell me about All Told.
Well, All Told is a novel, but it's an unusual form in that each chapter is a complete short story, beginning, middle, end, and most of them are written from a different character's point of view. But there is still a novel arc. The story is about Jack, who, excuse me, Jack, who is the central character, and he is a serial cheater. He has cheated on women since he was in high school. And you learn in the book why. You learn how he came to be this person. But then the book goes on to show the effects of that. It shows the effects on, of course, the women. He's also been married 3 times. He is still married to his third wife. And so we do see a chapter from the first and second wife and also from the third wife. But it goes further than that. I wanted to show the ripple effect of infidelity. So there's also a chapter about, for example, the son that he didn't know he fathered. There's a chapter from a bartender's point of view who is just about to meet the woman of his dreams in his bar when Jack shows up and says just the right thing and takes her away. So you get a whole bunch of different perspectives to see the full breadth of what Jack wrought, basically. But you also get the novel arc. You find out what happened to Jack. So
Oh,
it's a different
fascinating.
kind of book.
It is a different kind of book, yes. And, kind of weaving together all of those perspectives. Yeah, because there are so many, like you said, so many ripple effects of our choices of infidelity and the way we interact with each other. So, what drew you to want to explore marriage, relationships, and connection in this way?
The whole thing kicked off really with the Me Too movement, which is not about infidelity. It's about inappropriate behavior in the workplace. But what really struck me when Me Too started was that when a woman would step forward and say, hey, this happened, she was never alone. There was always at least another woman and often many other women who said, hey, me too, with the same man. And so I began, and they didn't know about each other. There was no sense that this was happening to many as opposed to just the one person. So in my head, then I jumped from that to infidelity and the phrase, once a cheater, always a cheater. And so I thought, how often then is a woman involved in being an other woman, thinking she is the only one? And then actually, there's many. There have been some before her, there have been some after, and there are women right now standing beside her who are involved in this relationship. So it went from there. And, it started just as a short story. There's a chapter in the book that is called, we should know my names by now, but I don't, Something Other. And it was from the perspective of a woman who is an other woman and has been with Jack for 8 years and is perfectly happy with that. Wasn't waiting for him to leave his wife. She was just happy with their relationship. And he slips one day and she finds out there's another one. And that kicks off a storm. And when I finished that, I thought, well, what about the other woman? So then I went on to write her story. And then I got into Jack, and so the whole book just sort of blew up.
Oh yeah, that characters sometimes have a way of doing that, right? Where you're
Yes,
like,
they
oh, I'm
do.
just gonna write this one little story, and then it just kind of goes from there. And I imagine too, like following those ripples and seeing all of those connections, it leads to this, kind of like chorus of voices about how they're all affected and how
Right.
they all come together. What did you learn about kind of playing with some of those connections as you wrote them?
Well, I think that there's a general thought out there that the other woman is evil. She's wrong. She's involved in this kind of relationship and she shouldn't be. And I wanted to show both sides of the story. I wanted to show how she could be seduced into this kind of relationship and get stuck in this kind of relationship. Not that what she did was right, it's not, but I wanted to show the full picture. So the more I learned about them, the more I learned about the hurt that could come from it, but also the strength that can come out of it when they learn to pull away. And of course, what happens in the book is they do end up starting to meet each other. They almost form a Jack Anonymous kind of thing. And there's strength in women, and there's strength in women together. And that really came out in this book.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. And I definitely agree. There's definitely strength in women together, which actually like perfectly leads into my next question, which is like, have you personally ever discovered an unlikely connection with someone else? And if so, did that somehow factor into your writing of the book? And if not, would you love to find someone who has like an unlikely connection with you?
Gosh, I mean, I can't think of anything right now. Well, maybe. I mean, this is a totally different thing, but when I was done with college and I had my degree in writing, I didn't go to a master's right away. There was a big group of years. And so I joined a writing group through a technical college, and I met a woman named Ellen Honeycutt who lived here in Wisconsin, and she was an amazing teacher. She won the Drew Hines Award. And she was the first person that told me I had the voice of a novelist and that I should be writing literary fiction. So she meant a lot to me, and she was with me for a long time. And when I started teaching, she was the first person I reached out to say, what am I doing? How do I do this? And she taught me that too. Years later, after Ellen is gone, she passed away, I'm on Facebook and I'm friends with another writer who, when I mention in a today's moment about Ellen, he says, I know her son. And her son is my age. I always knew of him. I never met him. So he connected us with Carter, and Carter is a friend now. And I wrote it today's moment about meeting him, because looking at him and hearing his voice, I saw Ellen all over again. And when he talked to me, he said, God, I could be talking to my mother. You sound like her. You write like her. It's amazing. So that was a kismet sort of situation that really has enriched my life. I love having Carter in my life.
Oh, I'm getting like shivers and goosebumps. Like I love hearing those kind of moments of unlikely connection. I feel like I have one that's just a little bit similar too, where like a friend of a friend connected me, and like same kind of story, where actually like a friend from college met another person named Erin Popelka, and she was like, oh my gosh, you two Erin Popelkas need to know each other. And so it turned out that like we actually met on stage, because like when your name is Erin Popelka, the only way to meet the other Erin Popelka is on stage at like a live storytelling event. And now, yeah, we're connected and we're friends and we've hung out, and we don't live close to each other. So hopefully there will be more hanging out sometime in the future. But it was just one of those ones where it's like, oh my goodness, like how is it? We have like very eerie things in connection with each other. Like, it's apparently having the name Erin Popelka means certain things go with that too. So
Cool.
yeah, like love your story of connection. Wanted to share a story of connection myself too. And in your response, you talked a little bit about today's moment, and you have a book out called Today's Moment of Happiness Despite the News. It's a collection of essays, and I was so privileged because I got to see some of them as you posted them on social media live in real time. These like really fantastic little stories and essays, and just wanted to like just hear a little bit more about that. Like, how did you learn to see those moments, and how have noticing those moments of happiness despite the news, how's that changed your life?
Oh my gosh, it's been huge. And actually the painting behind me is the cover of Today's Moment of Happiness Despite the News. It's, it starts out as kind of a sad story. 2 days after the inauguration in 2016, I was walking my dogs around the block. At the time, I had two very old beagles. One was 15, one was 13, and they were both sick, and they were both pretty much on their way out of this world. And as I was walking toward home, I was approached by a man who, among other things, he was wearing a Make America Great Again hat. It was one of the first things I noticed about him. And I always, when I walked my dogs, I would step off the sidewalk, because not everybody likes dogs. Well, they were old. They weren't moving very fast. And I saw this man draw his leg back. He was going to kick one of my dogs. So I got between him and my dog and he kicked me instead. And then he grabbed me by the shoulders and he threw me to the ground and he shook his finger in my face and he said, "It's time for you to go back to your place now, woman." And off he went. So I pulled myself together, got my dogs, went back home, didn't realize really that I was in shock, and went on Facebook and said, "This just happened." And everyone said, "Call the police." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I did. And I ended up being one of the nationwide news of Trump hate crimes that happened soon after he was elected. And it all blew up. I mean, the attack itself was hard enough, but the response was worse because I started getting hate emails, hate tweets, hate Facebook messages, messages put in my mailbox, threatening me, threatening my life, threatening my family's life. And the worst one was probably one in my mailbox that just said, "We know where your daughter goes to school." And so I was terrified. I suddenly felt like I was living in a fishbowl and felt like I couldn't go out. I'm a very public person. I have to be. And suddenly I felt like a target. And I was getting to the point where I couldn't leave home. And so I knew I had to do something to get myself out of this fear and out of this situation. So I started by writing one moment of happiness a day and posting it on Facebook because I knew if I did it on my own, it would last 2 days and I'd quit. Where if I committed to it in public with people watching, I would continue. Well, my Facebook page was flooded with people who were checking every day, what makes Kathie happy? So I moved it to my website and I made it into a blog, and my website actually crashed, I don't know how many times because of so much increased traffic. And so being me, I was like, okay, this is great. I'm going to commit to do this for a year. Every day, I'm going to come up with a moment of happiness. Oh my God. Not knowing that in the course of the year, not only was it starting that way, but my daughter, we were going to have to move my daughter to a new high school because of extreme bullying. My husband was going to lose his job not once, but twice and take our health insurance with it. And I was going to be diagnosed with breast cancer. And I had to come up with a moment of happiness every day. And it really, honestly, looking back at it now, this couldn't have happened at a better time, because instead of starting to drown in the overwhelmingness of this horrible year, it made me look ahead. It made me try to find these things and look beyond things like, oh, there was a rainbow today. I found happiness in little bitty things. And it got me through the whole entire year. I only missed one day. And the only day I missed was the day my husband lost his job for the second time. And I was just struck speechless. But it got me through. And so that's where it started. At the end of the year, I was like, we're going to switch to once a week now, folks. And people said, well, it's going to be a book now, right? And I was like, no. I wrote these off the top of my head. There's no editing. The only thing I did was look for grammar and punctuation and spelling. Nothing else changed once I wrote them down. And I'm like, they're very raw. No, I'm not going to put it in a book. But my publisher contacted me and said, they're asking for a book. Don't you think we ought to do a book? So we did. And so it's out there and the blog is still going strong. And trust me, I mean, I just posted yesterday and there are weeks when I'm like, something make me happy because I don't know what to write about this week. But that learning to broaden the vision a little bit and not just look for the obvious, but look for the small things that maybe made me laugh for a minute or smile for a minute, those can be used. So that's what I do.
Yeah, so beautiful. And I do think that that's one of the powerful pieces of writing or even creating art is you do have to slow down a bit and to feel the moment. If you're slowing down to draw a flower, you see every line, you see the shadows differently, and I think the same is true for writing. And I've noticed that, and reading too, when you notice something described really beautifully, it brings it to life in a way that you wouldn't have expected. So I certainly have noticed that in reading your moments of happiness, where it's like, oh, I should slow down in the Starbucks line. There's lots of moments that could happen here. I should slow down when I'm jumping in the pool, there's lots of moments of happiness here. So thank you for doing that. And yes, what sounds like a very traumatic like initiating event, and then a very rough year. So
Oh, god awful
yeah.
year. I mean, it made the first year of the pandemic look like a breeze, you know.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's all comparative.
Oh my gosh, indeed, indeed, indeed. Well, you are also an inspiration. My last question is, as I open with, you are the author of 12 books and 6
Yep.
novels. And your first book, your first novel came out right at your 50th birthday. So would just love to kind of end and hear any advice you have for people who are starting something new later in life.
Oh my gosh, you don't quit. You know, that's the biggest thing. And you don't wait, you know, it doesn't matter how old you are. What was the book 2 summers ago? Where the crawdads sing, you know, and she was like in her 70s or 80s and having her first book out. So you don't wait. You know, for me, the book was elusive. You know, I published for the first time when I was 15 years old, with a short story in the Catholic Herald Citizen of all places, and wrote a story, the story of Christ in 1970s lingo. And they took it. And I had great success with short stories. And I've been everywhere with short stories, but try to get a book out. And, you know, it was really hard. And like I was telling you before we started here, I was represented by 4 agents, 2 of which were top-notch New York agents. And twice they got to the end of their year and they were like, well, we need to pause. We need to put this book on the shelf. You need to go write something else. And I said, no. You know, I fired the first agent, hired the second agent, second thing happened. And then I marketed myself and I sold the book myself. And even now, 12 books later, with the 13th coming out this summer, right now I am unagented. I have been unagented the whole time. And I have worked hard to understand the publishing industry so that I know how to approach it. I know how to read contracts, and I do it on my own. But you don't quit. You know, you believe that the first book that sold, it took me 3 years to sell it. And yet when that acceptance came, it was with the Main Street Rag Publishing Company. And one of the first things the publisher said to me was, man, New York missed their turn with you. And later he said, I was the first book they accepted that they did not edit one word. Everything stayed exactly the same. And so, I mean, it's our business is so hit or miss. And it often has nothing to do with talent. We always hear it has to do with being in the right place at the right time. That's absolutely true. And it also has to do with determination and discipline and just sticking with it and believing in yourself. You know, so that's what I did, and it happened. And now there's been a book pretty much every year.
Oh my goodness, amazing. Well, what a beautiful place to close. Determination and believing in yourself. I think that
Right.
is just such a fantastic thing. Well, thank you. Thank you for staying determined. Thank you for writing. Thank you for all that you do so that we get the privilege to read your incredible work. Must readers, please do check out All Told. Show us that gorgeous book again by Kathie Giorgio. And Kathie, thank you so very much for taking the time to speak with me today.
You are very welcome. Thank you for having me.